Today's little project is we're going to change the chain out on the R1. We got this chain from Vlad. I'll put his email address up there for his business. He's a good source of parts, and he's been supplying me with parts for many years now. Anyway, doing a chain change, relatively straightforward, but a couple of tips you might be able to use. So the chain we're going to be installing is a Regina chain. I've got them pretty much on all the bikes right now. Good quality and a pretty good price, and again, Vlad has been pretty good with the pricing. Now, of course, you can decide for yourself what the correct interval of changing a chain is. What happened, and just to make a long story short, the last time I changed a chain on this bike, I was lubing the chain. I noticed it had a really bad link, and I put that on the video. It's on a video somewhere back in our collection of 1100 videos, but this chain change is going to be just a little bit different. I'm trying to show the various ways you can do this for my friends. Now, most of the bikes we've already replaced both front and rear sprockets with sprocks. The R1 has a sprocks and a replacement front sprocket, and that front part is already pretty clean. So I'm going to do this the easy way of just threading the chain, taking the old chain off and threading it through. Try to show that method today. But for sure, if you have a bike with the 15,000-20,000 miles since it's had a chain replaced, you want to take that side cover off and clean it out. I would anyway. But on this bike, I do that on a regular basis when I'm detailing out the bike, and it's usually pretty clean. And I even took the liberty of putting a Regina chain on the RD when I did the restoration, and boy, I'm very happy with the quality of the Regina chains. Well, one tool we always have available is our cutoff wheel, Harbor Freight cutoff wheel, and that'll make this job a lot easier. I'll explain as we go along. So step one is to be a parking lot attendant. Move some of these bikes around so I can conveniently get at the rear chain and get it up on a stand. And of course, if you have a bike with a center stand, it makes it even easier. None of my bikes have center stands. We got it up on a center stand. Now the first step is going to be to loosen all the adjusters so I can slide the axle front to back. I want to have that as far forward as possible before I cut the chain. Now, one of the reasons I spend so much time cleaning and polishing and getting rid of grease so that a day like today comes and I don't have to work on a greasy, rusty mess. I just like working on clean stuff a lot better. Now, this is a really good tip if you're going to use this method. I take some zip ties, tie the chain to two spots. I'm going to grind a link here to take this off. By the way, this chain is 9 years old. I got really good service at it. That's the original chain that came with the bike. And we've got about 25,000, 26,000 on it, so maybe it's really even overdue. But anyway, here's the whole point. I want to pick a link that I'm going to grind. I'll take the cutter and grind this. The reason for doing that is it'll save wear and tear on my tool. That chain braking tool, when you go to press these links out, yeah, sometimes it does, and you're grinding away at everything. If you take the two little nibs here and just grind them off, it goes so much easier, and that is really a good tip. And the zip ties are a good tip too. Otherwise, what can happen, that chain can just fall through. Another thing too, when you're doing this, the bike should be in gear. So that when you're using that tool back here, you don't want the wheel to jump forward or backward. Step one is I have to loosen the axle and then slide this as far, loosen the adjusters and slide that axle so it's movable and it's as far forward as possible. Now, by grinding that away, it just makes that right now the chain cutter is just going to be able to push that through without a lot of resistance and without a lot of wear and tear on a chain cutter. Also, I remember when Tim was here many years ago when he had the 600, Tim was having trouble using the chain tool. I'm not sure why, I don't remember, but I was getting impatient and he was heading to California, and I just took that tool and chunk. That tool will cut the chain in about 10 seconds. Now here's another good tip if you're going to do your own maintenance, which I guess most of my friends do their own maintenance for whatever reason. If you're going to buy a chain cutting tool, spend the money and get a good one. This one I believe was about 70 bucks. It was a promotion. It's worked perfectly. It's really been reliable. I always save any of the chain links I cut off from all the various chains I've worked on, all the extra O-rings. When you buy a Regina chain, you get 3 different master links with it. So the first thing you need to do, and I've got to push that pin out. I've got to set the tool up to push the pin out. Okay, this is the setup for the tool. Once this is pressed together, it's just a question of turning this. And by the way, the directions for this is the promotion one. The directions are really good, really easy to understand. The idea of everything we do is just to share information. And some of the information is stuff you might not know, and some of the information is stuff you know, but this might make it a little bit easier. And in this case, a chain change, whether you do the clean out or you just do this way, what I call the quick and dirty way. Having a good chain tool and having that tool makes it relatively easy. So now when we hook up the chain, we just need to temporarily put the link in. We don't need to hammer it in, of course. And we're going to slide it through. The axle adjusters are all the way forward. We'll lay the chain out like a wedding gown here and very carefully keeping tension on it so we don't jump the sprocket inside. Obviously, if we do, we just take the side cover off. But the idea of this is to do this the quick and dirty way. Now, one of the tips you can use is, see, normally you could stick a pin, but you'd have to press it in. Well, just to pull that chain through, you can use a little bolt. That's a really good tip. Save you a little bit of time. And you just don't want the bolt to hang out inside the case. Sometimes there's some clearance issues as you push that through the case. Now, the only step left, we take the zip ties off, keep tension on one side, pull the other side through, and as soon as we have it through, put a zip tie back in. Now you can see basically what I did is I have it like a wedding gown out there. I have the zip ties ready in hand, because what's going to happen once I cut these, the chain's going to come off. Now the whole idea here is, if you're real careful, if you have a helper, which sometimes we do, but we always gear around the idea that we don't. Now the whole idea here is, without me knocking anything over, keep some tension on this. Might be a good idea to take it out of gear. And once I get the new chain up in place, and I don't know if I have to shorten this. Okay, so step one, before I do anything else, get a zip tie on this, otherwise this is going to have a tendency to jump off. The zip ties are a good trick. And the idea when we're sharing information, I know everybody within the A-team does something really well. And if we all share the information, well, it can make this a lot easier, a lot more fun than it would be. Because a job like this, if it doesn't go well and you're by yourself and you have that really save a buck chain cutter, can be a real pain in the neck. So now we're at the point. We just have to take the bolt out of here and put the master link in with. Now, the Regina one has 3 different links, and there's, rather than to try to describe it, the directions for each of the links is different. We're going to have a press-in link. There's a little wire that goes in there. I'll try to show it. But basically, on a smaller bike, on a 600, maybe you could use the clip. On a big 1000cc bike, I want that link pressed. Now, if you've ordered an oversized chain, needless to say, you have to take a link out. We ordered the stock R1 is 120 links. Vlad got exactly the right chain. Doesn't look like we're going to have to cut a link out. And now it's a lot easier to get that bolt out than to take that press pin out. Now I'm just very old school about this. Before I put this link in and press it, what I want to do is take my axle adjusters back out and make sure that I'm not at the end of the adjustment. I don't want to have that happen. Of course, if I do, I have to take a link out of the chain. And looking at the old chain, it probably could have got another couple thousand out of it. I'm not prone to want to do that, of course. Now, when you put these new master links in, of course, they give you 3, and they're different. What I want to have with that is I want to have that we got to get the O-rings in place again. You've got to read the directions. Each one of them is different. Now, with the axle adjusters just roughly about 1/3 of the way out, we have that much more to go. And a tip is, if you're at the end of your axle adjuster and you have a stock chain, the chain's probably worn out. That's just a gut way to tell. There's ways you can tell it picking up the link. And I have a tool that you can measure 10 links, and beyond a certain dimension, it's worn out. Of course, if you have a lot of mileage, they say, I'm not sure I would do this, but to replace both of the sprockets every time you change a chain, I'm prone to do it every other time. And I've never seen anything bad happen with that. But again, because I maintain the chain, I clean it. Now what's going to happen, and I always love this, there's so much grease on this because this chain is really a high quality chain. I'll clean some of this off as little bit that I can when I'm done. But what happens, the first 3 or 4 rides, it's like the old days when the whole back wheel is full of grease. But I always take that into account. And well worth it to know I'll have another 25,000, 30,000 miles of, hey, who knows how long I'm going to live. Now, when I set up the master link, the most important thing is not to get the O-rings screwed up. In fact, in this case, it's easier for me to do this job without gloves. And because it's a very delicate thing to get these O-rings in just right. Not impossible, but you sure don't want to not get them in right. And then there's this wire. And what this wire does is keeps you from over compressing with the chain tool, that you don't over compress it, you leave the right amount of side slop. You can also do it with a micrometer. I like to do it both ways, just to double check. Make sure the O-ring is in there. Now when I put this side on, I'll put that wire in between. I'll put the O-rings on there. And then using the tool, using the chain tool, it'll mushroom out one side of this at a time. And I want to check when I'm done with a micrometer that I have this thickness. If this is whatever it is, and this is 10 thousandths bigger, I'll squeeze it a little more. If it's 10 thousandths, and you really don't want to have it, because what happens, you don't want it tighter, because what's going to happen is you chew up those O-rings. And if you set the tool as per the directions, again, nothing beats reading the directions on this. This side is going to dimple it. This side is going to keep the other side from going through the chain. So this is the correct setup for pressing that side plate on. But again, I would rather not press it too far and mic it with a micrometer and then take that wire out and make sure we have it exactly the way it should be. It's kind of a critical operation. And here's one of those tips that's worth a lot if you're working by yourself. To hold this all together with the O-rings and the wire in place and everything there, it always wants to slip and slide out. What I found helps me anyway is I safety wire this into position, and once this gets squeezed just a little bit onto the pins, you don't need the safety wire, you can just cut it and pull it off. Of course, here's where being patient pays off. A lot of people right now, and including what I've done years ago, is just crank this down. Well, I don't really want to crank it down, I just want to set the pins. I want to make sure that I'm not over tightening this. All this is doing is pushing the plate on. I want the plate on, and I want it to be the thickness before I do the beginning, the mushrooming part of it. Now, just by looking, I can see I got a little bit more to go. Very close. But it's usually the mushrooming operation that gets you in trouble. So now, with this on, it's on temporarily. The safety wire did its job. And by the way, that's a great little tip. Boy, that works every time. And especially if you work alone, if you work in a, you got friends and people helping you, not a big deal. Now, I want to look at that Looks like I got it pretty close. A lot of times you don't. I want to get a micrometer. Before I go any further here. What I don't want to be is too tight. I'm real close. Wow. Maybe it's just my lucky day. Wow. Who knew? Just my lucky day. Now this is the dimpling tool that's going to mushroom that side of the chain. Now the only problem is, and this is, I want to make that mushroom that obviously the plate can't come off. I don't want to squeeze that link and squeeze and damage that O-ring. Now I don't want to overdo this. I would rather do it 2 or 3 times and not overdo it. I really don't want to, I'm still pressing against that wire. But once I take that wire out, I should have exactly the setting. Just move it up to the other pin. Another thing about doing this, the first time you do it, it probably will take a few hours more to familiarize yourself with the tool, just like any tool, but it's, in my case, it's something I like to do my own maintenance. I do enjoy it, and I like to know it's done right, that the person who did it tightened the bolts and put Loctite on them and put grease on the chain and whatever. Now I'll go back, get the caliper, remeasure this. It should be 87 if it's correct. Well, it feels like it's about exactly the same. These nominally 87, 87, 87. Now I measured about 4 or 5 links in each direction. They're all 87. And it doesn't matter if they're 87 or 88. I want them all to be the same. We're really close. We've got this mushroomed enough that that's never going to come out. And the way you can tell if the mushroom is good, another way, you can mic how big the diameter is relative to the diameter of the pin. It should be a couple of thousandths bigger. And it should be that you still have a little clearance. I've taken out the wire and I've got exactly the right clearance. I can get my fingernail on each side. And boy, there's plenty of grease on that chain. I do not look forward to the first time I have to clean that back wheel up. Next step, get the chain into rough adjustment. And then I want to take a rag with some kerosene on and try to get some of that grease off. Otherwise, the whole back of your leg and the whole back of the bike gets covered with grease. Now a little tip, something to always keep in mind. When a chain gets old, there's always a spot where it's real sloppy and a spot where it's tight. You always want to put the slop in on the tight spot. Otherwise, there's going to be a spot in the chain where it's just way too tight. It's a little loose, nothing bad happens. When it's too tight, you run the risk of eating up the bearing in the motor. Now, with everything adjusted here, and believe me, if you don't wipe some of that grease off, man, is it a job cleaning the back wheel. It might be time for a test ride. I hope you